Good morning. So as those of you who have experienced me preaching before know, I have occasionally been known to do what has been called aerobic preaching. But I'm going to keep that down a little bit. I want to stay in the camera view. But this topic of being the calm in the storm is one that I think is timely for many of us as both individuals and as faith communities. Because as I'm sure you all know, we are in a time of contraction, not a time of expansion. In many different ways, certainly in terms of the resources, we've basically used so many resources and exuded so much waste that the systems, the natural systems upon which we depend, are in contraction. Many have called that collapse, the collapse of the biosphere, the collapse of industrial civilization. But collapse can be a scary term because we think of the collapse of a building. And it's actually usually not like that. We have dozens of examples, scores actually, of civilizations that have gone through the rise and fall, boom and bust, progress, regress pattern. And we're classically in, if you have an ecological understanding of history, it becomes obvious. We're classically in the contraction period, and we're seeing the kind of political insanity, we're seeing the kind of economic corruption, we're seeing the kinds of social stresses, the divisions of in-group and out-group, the polarization of one group hating the other and the other hating the other and not even being able to talk across the boundaries. And so if we don't have an understanding of history, we can pull our hair out and say, this shouldn't be. But with an understanding of history, we realize, oh, this is right on schedule. This is what happens in every previous collapsed civilization in human history. And one of the things that we learn that can be most powerful is that there are always people who are able to be the calm in the storm. Not only be the calm, that is, be the place of grounding and centeredness and love and compassion and generosity and inclusion, but to also be inspiration for others. In other words, it's not so much clinging for hope as it is being in a way that others find hopeful by seeing how you live, how you act. That when you watch the news, when you understand the situation, when you hear about the tremendous challenges around the world, climate-wise, weather-wise, political-wise, and every other-wise, that you maintain a sense of serenity, or at least calm, at least acceptance. It's kind of that old 12-step prayer, or that's used in 12-step a lot, penned by Reinhold Niebuhr back in the 1960s. The serenity prayer: God, life, reality, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. But a lot of people don't know the next line. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace? That's the prayer as he penned it. And so what I'd like to offer this morning are just three things that I think can help us, can support us as individuals and as a congregation to be the calm in the storm. And again, the storm is like, it's sort of like what that perfect storm where you've got that dynamic, and this dynamic, and they're all interfering with each other. That's the world we live in. And the greatest way to not be the calm in the storm, the greatest way to be full of anxiety and fear and judgment and depression, is to not accept the things that we cannot change. So to accept the fact that we're one of those civilizations that's not sustainable, that hasn't lived preserving the well-being of the air, water, soil, and forests and life upon which we depend with religious ferocity. We've not been that kind of culture. And there's never been in the history of our species a unsustainable civilization on its way down choosing sustainability. Can't be done for very well-known reasons. And yet, most of us who have a heart, progressives, liberals, people who have been involved in social justice and all kinds of justice and inclusion, we often have been at work for some cases, decades, in terms of genuinely believing that we could still transform the systems. And that's great work, and I encourage you to continue with it with as much passion and commitment and devotion. Just to let go of the in order to. Continue doing the work of justice, of inclusion. Continue doing the work of peace, of environmental sustainability. But do it from a heart space of knowing that it's not going to save the world. It's not going to transform the world. But it may help save your soul. It may help you pass the mirror test, where you can look at yourself in the mirror and feel good that you're at least doing something in the right direction. Because we're all, remember nesting dolls? I like the nesting doll image. You know, we're all part of a nested reality. And I call the whole of that reality God, but I don't spell it the normal way. I spell it G, Earth, D. Or if I'm doing it on typing, G, Earth, emoji, D. Because then it becomes clear that whatever I'm meaning by the word God includes our biophysical creator, sustainer, and end. In other words, it includes our living creator, sustainer, and end. In secular language, we call that the biosphere. But sustainable cultures lived in right relationship to the biosphere, the entire community of life. Unsustainable cultures didn't do that. They mine and take from the living world for the benefit of the rich and powerful usually, but, you know, it trickles down a little bit, some, certainly not to the slaves and those who were oppressed, but still the culture goes through that process of expansion and progress, at least for some, and then it goes through a process of regress. So sustainable cultures live in right relationship to God, G, Earth, emoji, D. Unsustainable cultures are unfaithful to God. And again, I'm meaning the word God in a totally religious, natural sense, nothing supernatural or otherworldly here. In fact, to my mind, most atheists and most theists are in a neck-and-neck race to see which one can treat our biophysical creator, sustainer, and end with the least respect. We cannot relate to the living world as an it to be exploited without suffering the consequences. Sustainable has always meant relating to the living world as a greater thou, not a lesser it. So the first tool in the toolbox that I'll be offering this morning, the first thing that I think can support all of us in being the calm when your neighbors are in freak out mode, when your friends and family are in depressed or overwhelmed mode or pulling out their hair, the first thing that we can do, it's kind of like the put on your own gas mask first on an airplane before you try to help out, you know, somebody else. It's to attend to and nurture your own intimate personal relationship with life. You don't even have to use the word God if you don't want to. Just with life, with the biosphere, with the living body of our creator, sustainer, and end. Because as we do that, and that means relating personally to the soil, to the trees, to the animals in your bioregion. In other words, there's always a way to grow in deeper intimacy. It doesn't matter. You may be within, 6 months of dying, 90 years old, and it doesn't matter. We can all find ways, in small ways, to just nurture a more intimate, personal, yummy relationship with life as it is, not as we wish it was. And that can happen as easy as breathing. When we breathe in, all the atoms that maintain our bodies, when we breathe in one with 20 zeros, that many atoms. And when we breathe out, we breathe that many atoms. And those atoms and molecules were used to be part of trees and other creatures and everything else. So we interbe, is the way that Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist peace activist, talks about it. We interexist, we interbe by simply breathing consciously. When we breathe in, we're breathing atoms that were made in the past. We are communing with the past. And when we breathe out, we are communing with the future. And that midpoint is the point of sort of the pendulum where we go from in breath to out breath. So simply by attending to your breathing. In fact, when I speak in Christian churches, I say, I don't believe in the Trinity. I experienced the Trinity. I experienced the Creator, Redeemer, and Holy Spirit, because the Hebrews, the wind and the breath was the Holy Spirit. You didn't believe in the Holy Spirit. The wind personified and the breath personified. The only place you can experience the wind and the breath is in the present moment. So we can all nurture a healthier relationship with life simply by attending to our breath, or simply building topsoil, or simply helping butterflies. Connie actually has a number of monarch butterflies in chrysalis form right now. And so anything that we can do to do that will help us be the calm when our neighbors and friends and others are in an unsettled state. Let's just say that. The second thing is to honor something that in our civilization, in American culture, we keep at arm's length. We don't want to think about. And yet, as every spiritual tradition throughout human history has reminded us, when we keep our own mortality as an advisor, when we remind ourselves that we're not everlasting, we're going to die, and that at some point, whether it's the next 10 years or the next 2 million years, our species will go extinct. So when we honor that mortality and our own mortality, we can live fearlessly. And we don't take life for granted. As many of you know, because I've shared it the last time I was here, or perhaps the time before that, 14 years ago, I had an aggressive form of cancer that could have killed me in 8 to 10 months. I had a tumor the size of my fist in my spleen. And I went through a few days of freak out. And then I just reminded myself, okay, can I be with the possibility of worst case scenario, which is that I'm going to die in the next 10 months? Because as some of you have heard me say before, my creed, my belief system, my faith statement in a nutshell is really quite simple. Reality is my God. Evidence is my scripture. The epic of evolution is my creation story. Ecology is my theology. Integrity is my spiritual path. And fostering right relationship to reality is my mission. So in that context, if reality is my God, I reminded myself, as I realized I could die in the next 10 months, that, okay, if that's real, I can accept that. Then that's my allegiance is to what's real, whether I like it or not. That's what I surrendered to. And once I did that, once I accepted that I could die in the next 10 months, if the chemo didn't work, I would have died in the next 10 months, I had no fear. I was able to live every single day with awareness like, oh my God, I'm still alive. What a gift. I'm eating a meal. Wow, what a blessing. I'm going for a walk with my wife, and we're looking at this was on Whidbey Island. We're looking at the Salish Sea. Oh my gosh. So I wish I could say I'd done this before, but I didn't. It was only basically accepting and honoring that I was mortal and that I could die soon. And even if I didn't die in the next 10 months, I was probably going to die in the next decade or 2 or 3. Simply having that death, mortality as my advisor allowed me to treat each season in a more sacred way. Connie and I do this religiously. At the end of every season, we personify the season. And we'll say something like, thank you, summer, for being such an incredible blessing. If one or both of us don't get a chance to experience you again, and we actually hold in our minds and our imagination that one or both of us dies before the summer comes around next year, we just cherish what a gift you've been. And sometimes I'm moved to tears. It just helps me not take my life for granted, helps me not take my relationships for granted, helps me not take anything for granted. And the fact that I have been studying for 10 years now the rise and fall of civilizations, and I understand how that pattern occurs, I don't even take the things that most of us rely on for survival for granted. Literally, like about a week ago, I remember saying to Connie, we were eating breakfast, and it was like, wow, what a gift. We still get to go to the grocery store. We've still got a working refrigerator and a freezer. Am I confident that that's going to last indefinitely? No. In fact, I'm confident that it's not going to last indefinitely. But by God, I'm going to treat it as sacred and holy and meaningful and like, wow, what a blessing, as long as I have it. Again, that's part of that accepting, the worst case scenario possibility, even if the worst case never happens. That was the thing. Once I accepted that I could die in the next 10 months, no other scenario had any power over me. I literally was able to live fearlessly and joyfully on a day-by-day basis. And there wasn't one part of me from that moment, there wasn't one part of me that was resentful. Like, why do I have to have cancer? At the time, I was only 50 years old. There was none of that because I accepted the possibility of worst case. So I would encourage, one of the ways that you as individuals and as a congregation can be the calm in the storm is to just remind yourself that you're mortal, that you'll die sometime. Connie and I regularly will say something like, yep, soon we'll be dead. We'll be soon like everlastingly dead along with every other creature. But we're not lost. We die into the body of life in the same way that our atoms and molecules die into our body, and yet we continue. And so even if our species goes extinct in the not too distant future, which is absolutely a possibility, being at peace with that, then no possibility has power over us. And we live with mesmerized, what I call gobsmacked gratitude. Gobsmacked gratitude, like what a blessing. Now, obviously, is it easier for me as a 64-year-old to say that than a 25-year-old? Well, duh. People are at different stages in our lives. And somebody who's in retirement and is, sort of assessing like what they spent their life doing, and then they're wondering if was it really good for the planet. So the death of legacy is not the same thing as a young person dealing with the death of dreams, the death of possibilities. So the first is to nurture an more intimate, personal, yummy relationship with life as it really is. Whether you use God talk or not God talk for that, it doesn't matter. With the universe, with the earth, with Gaia. Okay. The second is to don't ever go more than a few days without reminding yourself that you are mortal and we are mortal. It sounds morbid, but I assure you it will increase the quality of your life substantially. Just to remind ourselves that soon we'll be dead. And all creatures go. Helps us live fully. And it helps us live as a calm space in the midst of a world that seems increasingly crazy. And then finally, to attend to the kinds of things that people almost always, not everybody. Some people are given a terminal diagnosis and they fight until like 3 days before they die, and then they finally accept. We all know people like that. Right? Maybe we've had people like that in our families. We also, most of us, know somebody who may at the start be in that place, but fairly quickly comes to the place of just acceptance. And then they live their remaining days, weeks, months, and sometimes years with a place not party down, see, that's the thing. So sometimes people say, well, you sound sometimes like a doomer, but you've got this like big smile and you seem to live with a lot of joy. You're like weird. And I get it. I mean, my website is postdoom.com. Post-doom, no gloom is my message, right? Unfortunately, to get to post-doom, you got to go through a little bit of doom. So if you haven't accepted like we are screwed, you're not in post-doom yet. You're still in denial of one sort or another. And that's okay. That's a normal, natural, healthy place. But to be that place of recognizing that our civilization is unsustainable, our civilization is in contraction, our civilization could contract pretty rapidly. And you add to that the kind of stability that allowed for civilizations to even begin in the first place, which is a stable jet stream that allowed us to grow food on a regular basis every year, pretty much the same without, there were variabilities. But now the jet stream's doing this. We've got these heat domes in several places in the world. We got unbelievable flooding, unbelievable drought, unbelievable everything. And it's like, how to make sense of this? I had an experience just 2 weeks ago where I was invited, this major sustainability organization in Pakistan invited me to do a 20-minute presentation to like these leaders of the country of Pakistan. It was televised on Pakistan state TV. And my program was like not holding back. And yet these people, Pakistan is on one of the front lines in terms of dealing. I mean, the floods they dealt with last year and this year also, I mean, it's unbelievable. And yet these people are finding their faith, their trust is supporting them. And many people were able to tell stories of the joy of being of support of others in chaotic times, in collapsing times, in difficult times. Because as all cultures have known, where we find the greatest meaning and joy in our lives is when we can be a blessing to others, when we can be a contribution to others, especially when we're not freaked out, but they are. And they wonder, why are you not freaked out? Why are you not depressed? Why are you not angry? Why are you not blaming those corporations or that political party or over there? Where's the anger and resentment gone for you? And it usually is because they've nurtured a more intimate relationship with God, however they understand that, where they've accepted possibility, at least, of worst case scenario. But then they spend their remaining days, weeks, months, and years, if we're graced to have that long, in support of others, looking for others. I have a T-shirt. Somebody gave it to me as a gift. It has a picture of the earth, and it has Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it, Teotihuacan, right? And I was walking about almost a year ago now in Depot Town in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and there was this young guy, and he looked at my T-shirt. I could tell he was trying to figure out what Teotihuacan was. I said, oh, it's an earth-honoring term. It means things are spiraling down, probably going to get worse, but just find a way to be a blessing to others. You'll be fine. Because that's the stance. The stance of being the calm in the eye of the storm, of being that place of calm in difficult times, comes from accepting reality as it is and being basically in this stance. Okay, here's what's real. Now, what's possible? And then living out of that place of possibility and service, compassionate, generous service to others in that place of chaos. And refusing to get into the trap of finding the people to blame. And that's tough for those of us who have been activists for many years, because we're all too aware of the evil that has been done by different corporate powers and different political factions and all kinds of stuff. It's very obvious. So to let go of that judgment and blame and find that clarity that comes from understanding, but also the compassion that comes when we let go of the judgment and realize we're all in it together. And this isn't the time to be right. This is a time to be compassionate. And we don't have to be compassionate, but we get to be. And when we get to be compassionate, we are the eye of the storm. We are the calm in the midst of the storm. So, let me just recap. Being the calm of the storm doesn't mean being in denial. It doesn't mean clinging to hope. It doesn't mean insisting that progress is eternal. What it means, quite simply, is accepting what we cannot change, accepting that there are already patterns at work. The forests of the world will continue to burn bigger, more powerful, hotter, probably for the next 100 years. And there's nothing we can do to stop it or slow it. It's already in runaway mode. The oceans are heating up to such a degree that the coral reefs of all the world will be lost, or virtually all the world will be lost, and it's out of our control. And I'm not going to go more. I could go on and on and on, and I'm not going to do it. But there are patterns that are at work that are already beyond human control. So recognizing that that's not your fault because you don't recycle or because you still eat meat or because you still drive. It's nobody's fault. It's just that we're part of an ecocidal civilization that's been human-centered, and we're part of an ecocidal tradition that's been human-centered for like 6,000 or 7,000 years. So we can get off the guilt and we can get off the judgment. This is just what's real. So accepting that and then doing whatever you can to, again, nurture a more intimate relationship with life on life's terms. Connie, my wife, helps other trees. She helps trees migrate. She's a part of this whole thing that Robin Wall Kimmerer, the Native American elder, calls helping forests walk. It's helping trees. In fact, when we leave here today, we're going to go visit one of Connie's friends and colleagues in this field of assisted migration, assisting trees in migrating. It's holy work, whether we go extinct in the near term or not. So, nurturing a more intimate personal relationship with life, befriending your mortality and befriending our mortality, and then simply doing the kinds of things that most people do when they truly accept that the end is possibly in mind. I try to live my life with the end in mind, with loving kindness and gratitude in my heart, and with the truth on my lips. That's my prayer on a day-by-day basis. God, again, I'm not meaning anything supernatural, I'm meaning life. God, help me live today with the end in mind, with loving kindness and gratitude in my heart, and with the truth on my lips. Do I do that perfectly? No. But it gives me a lot of joy, and I have a lot of people contact me who are in freak-out mode or anger mode or depressed mode or whatever, because by the grace of life, I've become the eye in the storm for many of these people. So I want to read in closing this book, Eye of the Storm, Facing Climate and Social Chaos with Calm and Courage, was just published last month. And I will begin tomorrow recording the official audiobook of this. The author has asked me to do that. So I'll be recording the audio of this. And if there's one book that I wish every congregation would use as a study guide, it's so helpful, it's so practical, it's not academic, it's just really practical with short sections. But I just want to read 3 paragraphs from the preface because it so captures both what she's trying to do with this book, but also the promise that I offer it for you all as individuals and you all as a congregation. She says, in the past 3 years, I have supported hundreds of people who are facing or anticipating great loss from climate chaos, ecological devastation, and social upheaval. I have met them in my local community and an international online group called Deep Adaptation, whose purpose is embodying and enabling loving responses to our predicament. I've witnessed their fear, their grief and despair, and their struggle to make sense of this strange new world unfolding all around us. Species and habitats are disappearing before our eyes. Climate change, it turns out, means catastrophic floods, epic fires, unprecedented heat waves and droughts, and other life-changing disruptions. Meanwhile, many governments and social systems seem to be crumbling before our eyes. She says, I have observed what helps people cope and what empowers them to take constructive action with a joyful heart. I'm inspired by so many people whose response to the breakdowns we face is to serve others, human and non-human. I've participated in activist networks in my area, but I don't expect to save a whole lot. Instead, I aim to help human and non-human communities live well, to proclaim the value and dignity of what may be lost, or to simply act because it seems the right thing to do. And I offer this book as a companion and guide to help you cope and to respond to our predicament with compassion, creativity, and courage. Then you will find your own particular ways of service and action. Last 3 sentences. In times of transition, I've been graced to be the eye of the storm, the non-anxious presence who invites others into a space of calm reflection on how to put their values into practice despite an uncertain future. I know the power of framing our experiences through stories that express our values. And this is what the Unitarian Universalist denomination and congregations have done exquisitely well. And we now get to apply that in a new way, in a new context. May it be so.